Hello, grade 11s. Today we're going to talk about university research, sorry, and shortlisting. Miss Shan is dealing with some personal matters, so we will upload a different video later about UK. But for right now, we're going to talk about everywhere else in the world, okay? And then how to add and do some research on Bridge U as well. Just a sec. All right. So some things to keep in mind. You are only allowed 10 transcripts. So UCAS would count as one transcript. All the UC, so the University of California applications, also count as one. So if you apply to the UK and you apply to the UC schools, those are 2 transcripts out of the 10 that you have access to, okay? And you're only allowed to apply to 2 locations. So for example, the UK and Hong Kong would be 2 locations, or the UK and the US would be 2 locations. Anything more than that, it gets confusing and it just makes things complicated. And we want to keep things simple. You're going to be very busy your senior year. We want you to have quality applications, not quantity, okay? So when you're looking at these schools, they really should be best fit for you, and they should be schools that, you think you can get into. So stop focusing on rank, but focus on fit. Do they have what you need? Are you going to be happy at this school for 4 years, right? Do they have your major? Do you know what you want to do? If you have no idea what you want to major in, going to the UK is probably not a good option for you because you have to know exactly what you're applying to. Most countries will require you to know exactly what you're majoring in. The US you can change super easy. Now, the US is very expensive, so I understand not wanting to go there. So Canada would be another good option. It's a little bit easier to switch in between majors, but it's not as easy as the US. Australia, UK, Hong Kong, they're more strict. You cannot really apply to anything other than your major. So, that's not true. Australia, you can apply to a specific area and transfer within the area. So we're going to say engineering. So engineering, I believe, is technically under the umbrella of their mathematics school. So you can transfer within the mathematics department. But if you decide that you don't really want to be an engineer and you would rather do something in, like, say, psychology, you would have to actually reapply to the university into the psychology program. So within the major, a little bit easier, but out of the major, not as easy. UK, once you've picked your major, that is your major and you cannot change it all. So you really need to be aware of what you're wanting to do and how committed you are to those things. When you're also looking at these, you want to make sure that you have a range of schools. So you want a couple of safety schools, you want some match schools, and you want some reach schools. So safety schools are schools that you know you're going to get into. They're going to be super easy. You're above what they're requiring. So if you're looking at your predicted grades and say you have a 40, and the school requires a 31, that would be a safety school, right? If you're looking at a school and you're, say, maybe a 38 and you're applying to a school in, like, the UK, a 38 would be your reach. And then you would go down from there, okay? So we're trying to make sure that you know where you fall. So for the UK, your predicted grade is going to be the reach school. And then you'll go down from there, okay? Because that's the maximum grade that they think that you can get into. So please make sure that when you're looking at these, you're also keeping in mind, like, where you're applying. So, like, in the US, predicted grades don't really matter. They go off of what is on your transcript. So your grades need to be maintained. They don't really care about your IB scores. But other places do care. And some selective schools in the US do want your predicted grades, and they do kind of care about those. But for the most part, it's your transcript. So when you're applying, make sure that you're aware of which schools are considered match, safety, or reach. Match is you're in the middle of where they usually accept, okay? So if you have a 38, maybe like a 35 to 36 range is what you need for a match. And then a safety would be anything under that. Some things to also consider. Weather. It's seriously more important than you think. I've literally had students who have applied to places where it is very cold year-round. Well, not year-round, but very cold in the wintertime. And they're from southern China, right? And so they're not used to snow. And they're not used to humid cold. And so once they started getting accepted to all these schools that were in cold places, they realized that that wasn't something that they wanted. And now they're at a U.S. school that is in the Middle East. So please keep in mind that weather is much more important than you think. If you've never been in snow before, maybe choosing a school in like Canada or Minnesota or Wisconsin or Michigan, New York area, that might not be a smart idea because those areas get really cold and you're going to want something further south, okay? UK, it rains a lot. How do you feel when it rains a lot? Or do you get really sad with the weather, not being able to see the sun? These are things to think about when you are applying to schools, okay? Another thing is cost. Can you afford it? That is the most important question. If you can't afford it, then maybe you shouldn't be applying. Major. Does your school have it? I know kids who have gone to schools that are their dream schools, but the school doesn't have their major. So halfway through they had to transfer to another school that had their major so they could actually do what they wanted to do. That's not smart because what happens is sometimes courses don't transfer between schools and so then you're having to retake classes. So it's basically a waste of your money and your time. So making sure that you're going to a school that has your major first is very important. And then the city. Does it have public transit? Is it close to airports? Are there cultural experiences? Are you going to be the only person who might be from Asia in your campus? Public transit is very important because most of you probably will not have cars. So how are you going to get around? Proximity to the airport. How close are you? This may or may not matter for you, right? Right now, we're probably about an hour drive from 2 different major airports. And then a ferry ride, right, from a 3rd major airport. However, how often do you use those airports, right? Pre-COVID, it would be very important for you to be near airports so you can travel and go see family and stuff. Now with COVID, it might be a little bit more difficult. So these are just things to keep in mind. And the cultural experiences is like, are there going to be things that you're going to enjoy? Because you're going to get a little homesick. So are you going to have cultural experiences where you can be reminded of home? Are you going to have access to food that reminds you of home? I do recommend, though, before you move anywhere, that you learn at least one dish, how to cook one dish that's maybe your favorite. So when you are feeling homesick, you know how to cook it. Some other things to think about is, this is an example from a website. I believe this is, I can't remember which school this is, sorry. I can't remember which one I took this from. So this school, if you look right here, it has a waiver for you if you have attended an English school where the primary language of instruction is English for 3 or more years. So when you're looking at this, it's like, oh yes, this is required, but you don't need it unless this happens, right? It's not always 4 years. Sometimes it says 6. Sorry, this one says 3. Sometimes it says 6. Usually it says 4. Sometimes it says 3. This next example, I believe, says 2. Yes, the last 2 years. Oh, sorry. So the last 2 years right here of secondary school. So this is University of Wisconsin-Madison, or sorry, University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And so you can see that they do have a waiver. So just keep these in mind when you're looking at their website. Please do your research, okay? Don't just stop at it is required, because oftentimes there is a waiver and you need to look at that. And sometimes it will have like an IB score. Typically it's IB English A, HL or SL, but some schools will have IB English B, HL with a specific score. And typically it's a 5 or a 6, like a 5 or higher. So like for the IB English A, SL, it's probably going to be a 6 or higher. And IB English A, HL will probably be a 5 or higher, if that makes sense. So then we also have a few resources, and I will share these resources with you in a minute. Again, we haven't added the UK things because Miss John is going having some personal things going on, so we're not going to talk about the UK for right now. We will do that later. When you're in Bridge U, under universities, you can see all these main like schools, like countries that most students apply to. You can click on those countries. So I clicked on the US, and you can see all the different universities. And right here, you can see subjects offered, and then you could drop down by more specific major, or you can search by major. And these are all like the main content areas. So engineering is broad, right? There's a bunch of different ways you can be engineering. So you would click on that, or business, or finance, journalism, and medium. Like they're the overarching major, and then inside you would narrow things down. And then here you can see all the schools that have this major, and then you can narrow it down by country of the website. Okay, so this is Fair Test. Fair Test is a list of all the schools that do not require an SAT or ACT. So we're going to go to the optional list. So you'll click on college admissions and then the optional list, and you can scroll down and you can see all the different schools, and this is in alphabetical order. You can even download this as an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF. But if you go all the way down to the bottom, sorry. Let's get there. Okay, you can see the key. So if it has a 1 next to it, it says it's only used for placement for academic advising, or it's required for out-of-state applicants, if you're not meeting the minimum GPA requirement. 5 is it's flexible, which means you can have an SAT, ACT, or an IB score, or an AP score. Since we're not an AP school, you don't have to worry about AP, right? We're doing IB. So you would submit IB scores instead. You could submit a Duolingo test, or a TOEFL or IELTS score. But one test is what you're looking for. However, most schools are going to be test optional again next year. Now, they are starting to move towards not being test optional, so keep that in mind. So I would recommend taking it at least once. The next test is going to be in May, and I'll announce that as we get closer. So this is the Fair Test one. This is one that you should definitely look at. It is linked in the PowerPoint, which I will share with you all. The next one is this study in studying Canada universities, okay? So this, you can see all the different schools that are in Canada. You can decide by province, you can decide by university names, you can compare them. So we'll click on, let's do by province, let's do British Columbia. The University of British Columbia, we'll click on here. So you can look at the school, you can find your program of study, you can compare it with another one. You can see the approximate costs for both local and international students, residents on and off campus. You can see they have 2 locations. And you can find a program of study. So if you click on that, you can also see all the different things. We're going to want it in English, right? And now you can see all the different engineering programs that there are offered. Okay?